Welcome to IVF This, episode 80, Manuals. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. After 10 years of primary and secondary infertility due to both male and female factor infertility, I am now the mother to 3 beautiful miracles. I am married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you how to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello, my beautiful friends. I hope you are all doing so well. I cannot believe we are 80 episodes in already. How fun is that? I do have a quick request. If you have been enjoying the podcast and you haven't already, would you please take a couple of minutes to leave a rating and review if your podcasting platform allows for that? I think Spotify and Google, I don't know, I don't think they'll let you leave a review or a rating, but like Apple or if you listen on Audible, they can. I would greatly appreciate that. And the ratings, really the reviews, that's what makes podcasts more discoverable. And that's what we want. We want to get this podcast out so that other people know that there are other ways to do this. And I know that a lot of you listening are in the IVF/infertility Facebook groups. So if you feel so inclined, give the podcast a share in there too. Maybe someone's really struggling and you could recommend the podcast or a specific podcast or message that really resonated with you. You could maybe do a post in there or something. And it's all about getting the word out to help more women to ease the suffering of those experiencing infertility and going through fertility treatment. So I do want to take a second longer, just one more second, and wish one of my beautiful, lovely long-term clients luck. And I'm hoping maybe you'll do that with me. I've worked with her for a little over a year and we've become very good friends. And when this episode is released, she will be smack dab in the middle of her 2-week wait following a fresh transfer. This lovely woman has been through hell and back, like all of us, with several failed implantations, transfers, and now using egg donors from a family member for this cycle. So if you have a second and you're so inclined, again, say a quick prayer, send a kind word, light a candle. Hell, go outside and spin 3 times in a circle and spit. Whatever your jam is, just spread some love and positivity for this kind soul. All right, let's get to it. Today, I want to tell you about one of the first coaching concepts that I learned when I was introduced to Brooke Castillo and the Life Coach School, and that is called the manual. So this concept can be applied to literally any relationship in your life, romantic, friendship, work, family. There's actually not a relationship that you have with any person in the world, from distant acquaintance to best friend, that you don't have a manual for. The goal of understanding this concept is to help you gain perspective on other people's behaviors and why and how they so very often do not align with your expectations. So the manual is, I kind of want you to think about it like an operating manual for like a robot vacuum. I happen to be looking at my robot vacuum right now. That's why I thought of that. It's kind of the operating manual for all of the people in your life. It's a set of expectations that we have for how people in our lives should operate, the things that they should do, say, not say, etc. I'm going to give you a few examples, both within the context of infertility and outside of infertility, so you can see how it plays to pretty much everyone. Most of us, and I want you to understand this, most of us have these thick ass manuals, like detailed, indexed. There's an appendix. There's this is an Odyssean level kind of book, right? Thorough. The only problem is that we do not share what is in this incredibly detailed operating manual with the people in our lives. We actually don't even really think about sharing them. Not because we want to keep this coveted information to ourselves because we enjoy being pissed off, but because we really don't consciously know that they exist. They're like this amalgamation of all the different influences in our lives: culture, family dynamics, family values, trauma, social circles, socioeconomic status, friends, your political leanings, and so much more. All of these different influences give us this perception that these things, the things that are in our manuals, are almost like no-brainers, that this is just standard practice for every person in the world. And the reason that this is so tricky is because it's not like whenever we start a new relationship or a job or start fertility treatments, we like download this 50,000 page manual for all the people so that they understand how they should behave in all the circumstances for everyone we encounter, and are like, there you go. Here's my list of expectations. Take copious notes. There's going to be a test on Friday. We just assume that everyone would or should behave the same way. So when we get upset with people and we think, well, anyone would know that you wouldn't do that, or that that's not appropriate, or who in their right mind would say or do, right? All of these are examples of manuals. What I want to make really clear from the outset, and I think I've already said this, but I want to say it one more time, is that having manuals is not a problem. Absolutely everyone in the world that has ever lived has had or does have a manual for the people in their lives. Where we get into trouble is when we base our emotional experience on whether or not that particular person follows said manual. And since we don't share these detailed manuals with people, well, then it's kind of impossible for people to follow them. Thus, you experience a tremendous amount of frustration, pain, resentment, all the things. And I want you to know that there's a different way to do it. So I'll get to that at the end, but I want to give you a few examples of how it kind of commonly comes up. And one of the things that really popped out to me when I was writing this episode was remembering a lot of conversations around injections. Injections in that your partner is not giving them, you're giving them yourself, and kind of what the expectation is for your partner, your spouse, whomever, to be around, right? This actually comes up a lot. And I had this one client that was adamant that they wanted to do their shots themselves. And they told their partner many, many times over, which I think is wonderful, right? They wanted their needs known. This was something that they felt like would help them have a sense of control. So it was really important to them. So that first shot they did together, right? They took the picture, all the things. And then the next night she went to the bathroom, but her partner didn't come. She didn't really think anything of it. And then the next night, and then the next night, and the same things happened. And so she was kind of growing more and more frustration. And by the third night, she really pretty much unloaded on him, saying all the things like, how could you not do this with me? You must not care as much, or you must not be as invested as I am in this process. So she had a manual that said in chapter 4, subsection 5, paragraph C, as pertains to fertility treatment, when we're doing injections, even if you're doing them yourself, your partner is with you. So we were coaching when she realized that, number one, she never actually told him that she wanted him in the bathroom in the first place, right? It wasn't really an expectation she articulated. She realized that she only articulated that she wanted to be the ones doing the injections. Now, before we started coaching, she assumed that this is just what people do. This was a general, universal understanding of the situation. When you're doing IVF, you're doing it together for every shot, unless you're out of town or otherwise completely indisposed. So you can kind of follow the logic that if that is her belief, then when her partner did the opposite of what she expected, well, it's not hard to understand or to see how she got to, well, they're not as invested in the process, right? Her natural assumption was that this is what everyone does who's doing IVF. But when we started challenging that expectation, right? It's not for me to say that something is wrong, but we want to question things. We just want to challenge our preconceived notions to see if there's something in there that's causing us pain, right? So when we started to challenge that expectation, that's when the manual really started to reveal itself. She was floored, and I mean floored, when I told her that my husband was not there for every shot of all of our cycles. Even if he was home at the time of the shots, even if they were just watching TV. It wasn't that I didn't want him there, but for me, it was just a thing I was doing, like going to the bathroom or brushing my teeth. So I didn't feel like he had to be there every time. He was certainly welcome, right? He wasn't banished from the bathroom. And when he was there, it was wonderful. But when he wasn't, that was perfectly okay too. This was like revelatory for her because she truly did feel like this was universal. This is just what you do, which again is not a problem. The sticky wicket, as it were, was when he was not there, she made that mean that he was not as invested in the process or not as invested as she was. And that was a source of great pain for her. So as always, it goes back to your thinking. It was what she made his absence mean in those moments versus his actual absence. Because if her thought was mine, it's cool if he's there, it's cool if he's not. Not saying that my thought is the standard bearer, but just that his absence didn't mean anything. I didn't make his absence mean that he wasn't invested or that he should be there or anything like that. Once my client's husband knew what the expectation was, once she tore out that section of the manual and let them read it, he was more than happy to oblige. He was absolutely thrilled to be there for each and every injection. Now, I had another client who felt like she was not getting the right kind of support from her husband. This was actually a really big point of contention for them because she was very much a verbal processor, looks for external reassurances, things like that. And he was not at all as she described him. I've never met him. I've never spoken to him, but as she described him, he is very much not. And she knew this about his personality. And for all intents and purposes, it works completely fine that they have these kind of stark personality differences. But she had this subconscious manual that when she was hurting, that he would kind of sit with her and have these like deep, intense conversations and offer a lot of verbal and physical reassurance, like pats and hugs and things like that. So when we were discussing this, we talked about how when she felt like he wasn't supporting her, she would feel very frustrated and kind of lash out at him, more like reiterate to him that he wasn't supporting her, right? But there was this big knowledge gap between them because to her, it was obvious what needed to happen. And that was just how you show support to people. That's how her friends showed her support. That's how a lot of her family showed her support, things like that. But for him, without specific direction, he was using his own manual, which says the best way to support people is to give them space and for them to if you need anything, just let me know kind of approach. And neither of them had shared their manuals for how to be supportive to someone and how to offer support to someone. So you see how manuals on both sides impact relationships, right? It's really amazing when you think about it through that lens. And that was kind of what was so groundbreaking for me. So what about a non-IVF example? This kind of thing comes up in work situations all the time. One specific thing might be constructive feedback. When I was working my corporate healthcare position, I had several staff members that consisted of both social workers and nurses because I was in case management. I had this amazing team. I actually still think about them to this day and smile. But anyway, I had an employee that would get annoyed with me whenever I offered feedback. Why? Because I would offer praise and then feedback. She didn't want that. She didn't want what she called the fluff. Her manual said that feedback was just something that needed to be corrective. There was no drama for her. In her mind, it was like, we're all adults. I don't need praise. Just tell me what I need to fix and I'll just do my job. She didn't need that kind of personal connection to her supervisor, which was me, that I preferred. It just wasn't important to her. And in fact, to her, it came across as disingenuous or like I was trying to soften her up or manipulate her or something like that. She had a manual for those types of interactions and our manuals did not align. But because she believed me to be disingenuous with my praise, it actually caused her to disengage with me more and with our department more because the majority of my staff responded very well and would also display that type of praise and feedback. I would get equally exasperated because I couldn't understand why she was what I perceived to be so standoffish, right? What an interesting way for me to interpret her behavior. I would then try harder to get her to engage, and harder I tried, the more I came off as like a code red clinger to her, the more distant she wanted to be. And it was all because of our manuals. maybe it could be the other way around for you. Maybe you have a boss that only offers feedback when there's an error or something to be corrected. So then you interpret their interactions with you as inherently negative because they don't offer you a lot of praise. And that's because of y'all's manuals. So why is it important to understand manuals? Well, like I said at the top of the episode, it gives us context for other people's behavior. Namely, that our expectations and preferences for how people should do things is not the reference point. Just because you think someone should not ask, "So when are you going to have kids?" doesn't mean that people actually shouldn't ask it. This is a really common conversational starter in our culture, and having that as an expectation is an almost guarantee to get pissed off. Some people think that this is a completely acceptable and even a beautifully connecting conversation starter. So your preferences and expectations are not the reference point for everyone else's behavior. I'm going to say that one more time. You are not the reference point. When we treat our expectations, our manuals, as the reference point for everyone else's behaviors, we are primed to interpret any deviation from that as a personal affront. And that's pretty understandable, because if you think that everyone in the world should know that this type of thing is unacceptable, and there are people out there that either don't care if it's acceptable or not, or it doesn't even occur to them that it might not be acceptable, then that's when things happen. It's gonna feel personal. It's going to feel terrible. If making crass comments about hurrying up to make a baby because the clock is ticking or some disgusting comment like that is unacceptable to you, but whenever Uncle Jerry hits the liquor cabinet at family get-togethers, and that seems to be the only joke, for lack of a better word, he can make, then you're going to spend a lot of time being frustrated and pissed off and in pain. Yeah, anger is a form of pain. We get upset because we pretty much always interpret a deviation from our manuals to mean something negative. We suffer because of what we make their behavior, their deviation from our manuals, what we make that mean. Things like, I'm not appreciated, I was disrespected, they're not invested, things like that. All of those are examples of deviations in how we interpret other people's behaviors. And worse, usually what we then tie it all back to is our inherent worthiness or unworthiness. Sure, drunk Uncle Jerry said the idiotic thing, but then that idiotic comment, instead of interpreting it as, yeah, of course, Uncle Jerry's going to get a little wasted and make stupid, obnoxious jokes at other people's expenses, we use it as like this twisted confirmation of our perceived failures, when it really is just, he's kind of a jackass. So again, the only problem with having a manual is what we make it mean when someone doesn't follow it. Because when someone follows our manuals, we get to feel good. Well, let's be honest, that's pretty rare, right? So conversely, when someone doesn't follow your manual, it doesn't feel good. But it's all based in our thinking. Someone following our manuals feels good. So let's take an example of my client who wanted her partner to support her better. Let's say her husband woke up with an entirely different personality one morning. And when she was upset, he sat her down, grabbed a bowl of ice cream that they could share, and they just sat on the couch and talked for hours. She would probably get to think something like, yes, finally, he's giving me the support that I want. And she would get to feel supported, right? Always back to think, feel, do cycle. The whole reason she wants that to happen is because of how she thinks she'll get to feel, right? What she'll think, which will create the feeling, all of that. Now, whenever I introduce this concept to my clients, their response is almost always, oh, I should just show them my manual. And I always kind of chuckle and say, well, yes and no, but mostly no. For people who have some sort of incentive to do what we want them to do, like an employee or something like that, sure, show them your manual. Or even sharing your manual with your partner or your bestie or whatever, totally fine. There's absolutely no harm done by sharing your wants, desires, expectations, wishes. Everyone is allowed to have and express their wants. But the beauty and freedom of understanding that everyone has manuals is that you can't change other people's behaviors, and honestly, that you don't really need to. If I could teach you techniques to change other people's behaviors, I would be a billionaire. And I probably would have also graduated from Hogwarts, because that would have made me a witch. We cannot change people's behavior. We don't need to. We just need to change what we are thinking and feeling. The way we get things, feedback from work, the way we perceive Uncle Jerry's stupid drunk comments, how you feel supported by your partner. Those things are not the problem. The problem is you're thinking about those things, how you interpret those things. Everything comes down to what you are making it mean in any given situation. The freedom in knowing that other people don't have to change and that you get to choose is that you have this available to you right now without ever having to share any manuals with anyone. Just by being aware in any given situation what you are making something mean, that you can create more context in your brain for the other person's behavior. Once you have context, you then get to decide what you want to believe about whatever it is. You always have the choice. You are unconsciously choosing to believe the negative thing, which, by the way, is still a choice that's available to you. There is nothing wrong with you or the situation if you choose to interpret something that way, as long as you are willing to take responsibility and accountability for the negative emotions that you will be experiencing, because you're the one creating it, not the other person. You always, always, always get to decide what you make something mean about another person, and absolutely what you make it mean about yourself. That's the freedom. That's where the freedom lies. That is where you can create more of that emotional resiliency that we talked about a few episodes ago. This is another beautiful step in that process. So remember, 2 things. Number 1, you want people to follow your manuals because you want that positive thought and that positive feeling. No other reason. And number 2, you are not the reference point for everyone else. And I hope that you all know that I say that as lovingly as humanly possible, because I want you all to have and experience the freedom of not being tethered to other people's actions, behaviors, words in order to feel things. I want you to have that certainty within you, that you know you will always have the choice to feel and think whatever you want, no matter what happens. You know how to take care of yourself. And that being an asshole to yourself is always, always, always optional. Okay, that is what I have for you, my beautiful friends. Have a wonderful week, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.